In the near term, I would expect that the inflation numbers will fall a little bit because they've been inflated as a consequence of a recovery of the US economy, in particular from COVID. That is transitory. But the real inflationary pressures don't have anything to do with the real economy. They have to do with quantitative easing. They have to do with the effects of debt and deficits. And they have to do with negative real interest rates, which punish savers and favor spenders. And the first point you made is the more important one. In terms of understanding inflation and coping with inflation, don't think about a month. Don't think about a quarter. Unlike you, I'm old enough to have been around for the 1970s. And the truth was that inflation was incipient in the 70s, really from 1968 to 1974. But because people had lived through 20 benign years before that, although they knew inflation was occurring, it hadn't bitten them yet.
Right.
And it took 4 years of experience with inflation before people felt their living standards were impacted. And the same thing is happening today. People understand intellectually what 8.5% inflation is, but it hasn't affected their living standards yet. When it does, yes, I understand. People go to the pump and they're afraid.
Yeah.
They are angry
Yes.
at paying more for gas, but it isn't impacting their ability to buy cars yet. It isn't. They haven't noticed the fact that 8.5% inflation against a 50 basis point yield in their savings products impacts the spending power of their retirements yet. They understand it empirically, but they don't feel it emotionally yet. When they do, I think that the response will be severe and dramatic, like it was in the 70s. I think that when people understand arithmetically that over 4 years, that the spending power of their retirement has declined by 25%, that people will change their behavior, and they'll change their behavior dramatically. For the last 40 years, buying bonds in a retirement account has been a very good thing to do. Now bonds are what Franz Pick called certificates of guaranteed confiscation.
Right.
People don't notice that in the near term, but
Yep.
a change in investing habits, as an example, which would cause disintermediation, which is to say a switch out of a bond portfolio into a more inflation-oriented portfolio, would be an absolute sea change in investing. And I think it's going to happen. I mean, credit markets will never be broken, but people who act as though the credit markets will be unchanged will go broke. That will happen. The bond market won't be broken, but some bond investors will be irretrievably broken. If you think about, as an example, the off-balance sheet liabilities of the US government, which is one of the causes of inflation, what that has to do with is old, fat, bald white guys like me have voted ourselves all kinds of cool benefits, and we've decided that you should pay for them. That's the nature of inflation. We have consumed and we have financed that consumption with 30-year debt that isn't backed with anything. Think about what negative real interest rates are. Negative real interest rates are old people consuming today and young people forestalling consumption in favor of older people, and the older people promise to pay them back less than they borrowed. This doesn't occur without a political construct. If you think about one facet of politics as being a war between spenders and savers, which is really what fiscal policy is about,
Right.
savers are scarce, spenders are numerous. In a democracy, the spenders will always outnumber the savers. And so I think that the reason for inflation is a lack of understanding of arithmetic among voters.
Does it get fixed?
All these things fix themselves over time. I was around for the last fix, which was Paul Volcker, taking the interest rate on the US 10-year Treasury from 5.5% to 15.5%. And it was ugly. It was profoundly ugly. It only lasted 3 years. The pain only lasted 3 years. The problem was when Volcker went to work, federal government debt to GDP was about 25%. Now federal government debt to GDP on balance sheet is 110%. So we have fewer tools, and the process of curing it is going to be more challenging.
What are your thoughts on the Fed's strategy and whether they'll be successful or not?
I think right now they're doing the right thing. I think they have to let interest rates rise as long as they can, as far as they can. I think they'll chicken out.
In raising them?
I think they'll chicken out when they've succeeded in raising them. You know, over the last 40 years, the U.S. 10-year Treasury rate has had a positive yield after CPI stated rate of inflation. The CPI stated rate of inflation is 8.5% now. That would mean that the U.S. 10-year Treasury rate would have to be 9%.
Right.
That would mean that the interest payment on federal, state, and local debt would triple. Traditionally, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate has traded at a premium to the U.S. 10-year Treasury, which means that 30-year fixed mortgage rates would have to go to 9.5%. Think what that would do to young people's ability to buy houses. If we had a period of real interest rates, it would certainly cure inflation, but it wouldn't cure inflation before it did amazing damage.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race, you're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dahn, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dahn.